Texas, July 1945. Camp Swift Medical Examination Room. The afternoon sun cut through screened windows, painting stripes across linoleum that smelled of disinfectant and summer heat. Captain David Morrison watched a German prisoner named Keith Schmidt attempt to walk 12 feet from the door to the examination table. She moved like someone carrying twice her age. Each step required visible effort. Her legs trembled with strain that shouldn't exist in a 24-year-old woman. Morrison had treated combat casualties in North Africa and Italy. He'd seen shrapnel wounds and battlefield infections. But something about this woman's struggle unsettled him in ways artillery never had. If you're finding this story compelling, please like the video and subscribe. We share untold World War II stories every week, revealing the human cost behind history. Leave a comment telling us where you're watching from. We love hearing from our global community. When Morrison asked her to remove her shoes and socks for examination, she complied slowly. Her hands shook as she worked the laces. The shoes came off. Then the socks. Morrison looked down. What he saw made his professional composure falter for the first time in 3 years of military medicine. Her legs were skeletal muscle tissue consumed by months of starvation. The bones of her feet and ankles were visible through skin that looked translucent. Multiple pressure sores marked where shoes had rubbed against unprotected bone, creating ulcers that had infected and partially healed and infected again. This wasn't simple malnutrition. This was systematic physical destruction. And in that moment, Morrison realized he wasn't looking at one prisoner's bad luck. He was looking at evidence of a society's complete collapse. Keith Schmidt had been transported to Camp Swift in June 1945 with 30 other German women captured during the war's final weeks. She'd worked as a clerk in a supply office near Hamburg, classified as civilian auxiliary, the administrative backbone that kept military logistics functioning. When British forces captured her position in May, she weighed perhaps 90 pounds at 5'6". The British processed her through temporary camps, provided minimal rations to stabilize her condition, then transferred her to American custody. The Atlantic crossing took 2 weeks. Keith spent most of it seasick, unable to eat even the adequate food provided. She arrived in New York having lost additional weight. The train journey to Texas lasted 4 days. Other prisoners noticed her condition, tried to help her eat, supported her during the few times she attempted to walk. But the damage was comprehensive. Months of severe malnutrition had depleted her body's resources in ways that wouldn't be quickly remedied. Morrison was 42, a physician from Philadelphia who had practiced general medicine for 15 years before his 1942 commission. He'd served in field hospitals, treated malnutrition, and liberated populations, seen what war did to human bodies, but he had never processed German POWs directly. The women arriving at Camp Swift represented a new category, captured auxiliary personnel who had experienced Germany's final infrastructure collapse. Morrison expected to find some malnutrition, perhaps minor untreated injuries. He did not expect to find systematic physical deterioration, suggesting months of severe deprivation. Lieutenant Sarah Chun, the WWII nurse assisting him, exchanged glances with Morrison as Keith struggled across the room. Both recognized this was more serious than routine processing. Morrison began standard examination procedures: height, weight, temperature, blood pressure. Each measurement revealed concerning data. Keith weighed 87 pounds. Her blood pressure was dangerously low, her temperature slightly elevated, her pulse rapid and weak. When he examined her feet more closely, the full scope became apparent. Her toenails were discolored, several broken. Signs of edema swelling from fluid retention marked her ankles despite her overall emaciation. The pressure sores were worst on her heels and the balls of her feet, where bones pressed against skin with no muscle tissue as cushioning. How long have you been unable to walk normally? Morrison asked through an interpreter. Since February, Keith replied in halting English. Maybe January. The rations? They became very small. Then there was nothing. And these sores on your feet? From the retreat. We walked for many days. My shoes did not fit properly anymore. My feet became smaller, you understand? From the hunger. But we had to keep walking. Morrison checked her teeth, several loose from scurvy. Her hair was brittle and thin. Her reflexes delayed and weak. Every indicator pointed to severe prolonged malnutrition affecting multiple body systems simultaneously. This wasn't just hunger. This was the body consuming itself to survive. He completed the examination and delivered his assessment. Fräulein Schmidt, you are severely malnourished. You have multiple deficiency conditions, probably vitamin C, vitamin D, protein deficiency, and general caloric starvation. Your body has been consuming its own muscle tissue to survive. This is serious and requires immediate treatment. Kaya's response was quiet. Will I recover? With proper nutrition and rest, yes, but it will take months. Your body needs to rebuild what was lost. This didn't happen quickly, and it won't be fixed quickly. Morrison spent that evening writing the most detailed medical report of his military career. He documented every finding, took measurements, made notes about treatment requirements. Then he wrote a summary that would go to camp administration and medical command. Patient Keith Schmidt, age 24, German civilian auxiliary, presents with severe malnutrition affecting multiple body systems. Weight 87 pounds at 5'6" height. BMI 14.0, critically underweight. Muscle atrophy throughout lower extremities preventing normal ambulation. Multiple pressure ulcers on feet, some infected. Signs of scurvy, loose teeth, gum disease. Possible rickets bone deformation from vitamin D deficiency. Hair loss in brittle males suggesting protein deficiency. His assessment was stark. This patient has experienced prolonged severe malnutrition, likely 4 to 6 months minimum. The physical deterioration is consistent with starvation conditions, not simple food shortage. Body has cannibalized muscle tissue, attempting to maintain vital functions. Current condition is life-threatening if not treated aggressively. His recommendation was immediate. Hospitalization. High protein. Diet with gradual caloric increase to avoid refeeding syndrome. Vitamin supplementation. Treatment of infected wounds. Physical therapy when stable. And one more thing, similar examinations recommended for all incoming female POWs from this transport, as conditions may be systematic rather than individual. Morrison submitted the report to Major Thomas Henderson, the camp's chief medical officer. Henderson read it twice, then called Morrison to his office. The conversation was brief, but significant. "This is worse than we anticipated," Henderson said. "We knew there was food shortage in Germany during the final months, but this suggests systematic starvation." "Systematic breakdown of logistics," Morrison replied. "Either way, if she's representative of the group, we need to adjust our intake protocols." "Agreed." "Examine the rest of the women from that transport. Document everything." Over the next 3 days, Morrison examined all 30 women from Katha's transport. The findings were consistent and disturbing. 23 of the 30 showed signs of significant malnutrition. 15 had BMI below 16, severely underweight. 8 had symptoms of scurvy. 6 showed signs of edema, despite low body weight. All reported dramatic weight loss during the war's final months. The stories were similar. Rations decreasing weekly, then daily. Infrastructure collapsing. Supply lines severed. Administrative personnel, the clerks and telegraphers and support staff, receiving the smallest rations because they weren't frontline troops. By March 1945, many reported eating one meal of thin soup daily. By April, some days no food at all. Morrison compiled a comprehensive report documenting the systematic nature of the malnutrition. This wasn't individual neglect or isolated hardship. This was evidence of complete societal collapse, affecting even military auxiliary personnel. Major Henderson convened a meeting of all medical staff. He presented Morrison's findings, showed photographs Morrison had taken documenting the physical conditions, and outlined new protocols. Effective immediately, all incoming posts would undergo comprehensive medical examination focusing on nutritional status. Anyone with BMI below 17 would receive immediate supplemental feeding. Anyone showing signs of vitamin deficiency would receive appropriate supplementation. Anyone with infected wounds would receive treatment before assignment to regular barracks. We're establishing a medical ward specifically for nutritional rehabilitation, Henderson announced. Captain Morrison will oversee it. The work began immediately. Keith was transferred to the newly established medical ward, a converted barracks with 20 beds, full-time nursing staff, and direct oversight by Morrison and his team. 7 other women from her transport joined her, all requiring intensive nutritional rehabilitation. The treatment was methodical, but had to be carefully calibrated. Small, frequent meals to avoid overwhelming, compromised digestive systems. High-protein foods to rebuild muscle. Vitamin C for scurvy. Vitamin D and calcium for bone health. Vitamin B complex for nerve function. Iron for anemia. But Morrison had learned about refeeding syndrome, a dangerous condition where starved bodies, suddenly receiving adequate nutrition, experienced dangerous shifts in electrolytes and metabolism. People could die from being fed too quickly after prolonged starvation. So the meals were carefully calibrated. Week 1, 1,200 calories daily in 6 small meals. Week 2, 1,500 calories. Week 3, 1,800 calories. Slow incremental increases allowing bodies to adjust. Keith ate mechanically at first, her stomach rebelling against the sudden abundance. She experienced nausea, cramping, digestive distress. But gradually her body adjusted. The meals became easier to tolerate. The food became fuel rather than torment. The physical changes happened slowly but measurably. Morrison documented everything, taking weekly measurements, photographing the progression, creating a medical record of recovery from severe malnutrition that would later become standard reference material. Week 2. Keith gained 3 pounds. The edema in her ankles decreased as her body's fluid balance improved. The infected sores on her feet began healing with proper wound care and adequate nutrition. Week 4. 8 pounds total. Her hair stopped falling out. Her teeth felt more secure. She could walk the length of the ward without stopping to rest. Week 8. 15 pounds total. Her legs showed the first signs of muscle rebuilding. She could climb stairs with assistance. Her skin no longer looked translucent. Week 12. 22 pounds gained, bringing her weight to 109 pounds. Still underweight, but no longer dangerously so. She could walk normally, participate in light exercise, function independently in daily activities. The recovery timeline shocked Morrison. He had expected improvement, but the dramatic transformation from skeletal weakness to functional health in 3 months exceeded his projections. As Keith recovered, she and Morrison had conversations during weekly examinations. She spoke better English than initially apparent, just too exhausted during early examinations to manage it. "Why did this happen?" Morrison asked during one session. How did the German military allow its personnel to become this malnourished? Keith considered the question carefully. The system broke, she said finally. In beginning of war, there was organization. Food was rationed, but adequate. But as war went badly, as infrastructure was bombed, as transport stopped working, the rations became smaller. And people like me, clerks, not soldiers, we were lowest priority. You said the food stopped in April completely? Almost completely. Some days we found potatoes. Twice someone brought bread. It was mostly sawdust. We ate grass sometimes, dandelions, anything, but there was nothing organized. No system, just survival. Morrison wrote notes documenting her testimony to accompany medical findings. Did you know you were starving? That you were at risk of dying? Yes, Keith said simply. Many people did die in the retreat, in the camps after capture. I thought I would die too. I accepted it. Then the British gave us food. The new Americans gave us more food. And my body decided to live after all. I'm glad it did, Morrison said. So am I, Keith replied. Though some days during recovery, when my stomach hurt so much from eating, I wondered if dying might have been easier. Morrison's documentation of systematic malnutrition among German POWs reached War Department Medical Command in Washington. The reports triggered broader investigation into conditions affecting incoming prisoners from the European theater. Similar patterns emerged from other camps. German military and auxiliary personnel captured in the war's final months showed consistent signs of severe malnutrition. The infrastructure collapse wasn't isolated. It was systematic across regions. Medical protocols were adjusted throughout the POW camp system. All incoming prisoners received comprehensive nutritional assessment. Medical wards for rehabilitation were established at major facilities. Treatment protocols Morrison had developed became standard practice. A medical officer from Washington visited Camp Swift in October to interview Morrison and examine his records. The officer, a colonel named James Bradford, spent 3 days reviewing documentation and interviewing patients. "This is remarkable work, Captain," Bradford said. "You recognized a systematic problem, documented it thoroughly, developed treatment protocols, and achieved measurable recovery. This is exactly the kind of field medicine that influences policy." "I was just treating patients, sir," Morrison replied. "You were doing more than that. You were documenting evidence of what happens when societies collapse. This data will be studied for decades by military medicine, by nutritionists, by historians. You've created a record of the human cost of systematic infrastructure failure." Keith became an inadvertent witness to these broader implications. As her recovery progressed, various medical officers and researchers interviewed her, asking detailed questions about her experiences with food shortage, the progression of symptoms, the psychological impact of starvation. She answered honestly, describing the constant hunger, the weakness that made every action exhausting, the way her mind became foggy and slow, the acceptance of probable death that came when hope for food disappeared. One researcher asked a pointed question. "Did you know that in America, while you were starving, food was abundant?" "We were told America was poor too," Keith said, "that everyone was suffering. When I arrived here and saw the meals, I thought it must be special treatment designed to make us compliant. Only gradually did I understand this is normal here. The abundance is real. The starvation was ours alone. How does that make you feel?" Keith paused, considering. "Angry," she said finally, "that we were made to suffer needlessly while somewhere else people ate well. But also grateful that you Americans chose to feed us adequately despite being your enemy. That Dr. Morrison cared whether I recovered. That the system here prioritizes human welfare, even for prisoners." In December, after 6 months of recovery, Keith was permitted to write letters home through Red Cross channels. She had learned her mother survived the war, was living in Hamburg with relatives. The letter was difficult to write. How did she explain that she was healthier as a prisoner in America than she had been as a free person in Germany? That the enemy fed her better than her own government had? She wrote carefully, explaining her near death from starvation, her legs that had stopped working properly, the American doctor who was shocked by how much damage hunger had done to her body, the careful feeding that helped her recover. She told her mother she thought about her constantly, wondering if she had enough to eat, that it felt wrong to be well fed while her mother struggled. The letter reached Hamburg 3 months later. Her mother's response came in April 1946, brief but emotional, thanking God her daughter was alive and recovering, telling her not to feel guilty for being fed. Hamburg was ruined and they survived on minimal rations, but they survived. Come home when you can. Keith remained at Camp Swift through winter and into spring 1946. She continued gaining weight, rebuilding strength, participating in camp work programs as her health permitted. By March, she weighed 118 pounds, still slender, but within healthy range. She could walk miles without difficulty, work full days without exhaustion, function normally. Morrison examined her one final time before her scheduled repatriation. The transformation was complete. The skeletal woman who could barely walk 12 feet had become a healthy young woman capable of normal physical activity. "You've made remarkable recovery," Morrison told her. "When you arrived, I wasn't certain you would survive. Now you're healthier than many people who were never malnourished. You saved my life," Keith said. "You and the nurses and the food and the medicine. I won't forget that." "Just doing my job," Morrison replied. "But I won't forget you either. You taught me important lessons about resilience, about how much the human body can endure and still recover if given proper care." Keith was repatriated in May 1946 and returned to Hamburg, reuniting with her mother in a city of rubble and hunger. The contrast with Texas was stark. She found clerical work with the occupation authorities and wrote to Morrison about her progress. By 1950, Hamburg was rebuilding, and she married a former prisoner who understood her past. Their daughter was born in 1955, healthy and well-fed. When asked about the war, Keith told her about Dr. Morrison, who saved her when her own country had let her starve. Morrison, discharged in June 1946, returned to Philadelphia and specialized in nutritional medicine, publishing influential papers based on anonymized Camp Swift data. His records, including Thu's recovery, were preserved in military archives and used by researchers. His photographs of her skeletal legs became teaching materials illustrating severe malnutrition and recovery. Their story shows human cost and human response. Keith lived until 2001. Morrison died in 1988. The camp buildings are gone, but the shock he documented, the care he insisted on, and the choices he made continue to shape medical understanding. In a Texas medical ward in 1945, a young woman who could barely walk slowly regained the ability to stand, to move, to live. The doctor who treated her didn't just save one life. He created a record of what's possible when medicine prioritizes patients over politics, recovery over regulations, and documented evidence over convenient assumptions. That's the legacy. Not just one woman healed, but a system improved, a standard raised, and evidence preserved that even in war, medical care can remain fundamentally human.